So much like empathy, I see honesty as being a universal human need. Okay, it's one of those qualities that if we are without it, it creates tension or sadness or some type of strain, as if we're yearning to experience something we're labeling honesty. So let's explore that label a little bit. It's just a word. But what it means to me is to be able to exist and have an authentic human conversation, authentic dialogue, and trust that what I'm getting matches what's inside the person. There's a congruence between what's inside a person and what they express on their outside. Okay? And when I have that, I can relax and trust and know that we are engaging with authenticity. And it invites me to open up at the same level. You see, honesty in an authentic fashion is contagious. When I open my heart and I'm honest with you, it tends to stimulate more openness in you to do the same, because there is now a shared vulnerability. We've both bought in at a deeper level, so to speak. Okay? Now, in addition to honesty being in need, it's a process. We have a particular recommended way in this practice of compassionate communication, of expressing honesty. And we're going to be exploring that. Okay? So, finally about honesty, the intention is important. Okay, so if you would like to share something with another person, the first and most important thing to ask yourself, what is your intention in doing so? Those of you who were here last night, I asked you to think about the same question about empathy. Is your intention with empathy to try to twist and shape the other person to your liking? Or is it something different? Is it about connecting with the life in them and trusting that if I get connected to the flow of life in them and I get in that flow, that it awakens all this new energy that creates a lot of possibility? Okay, so the same thing is true of honesty. Why share honesty? Why be honest? Why tell another person what you see, what you feel, what you really want? Why? Okay? So I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to ask you to hold that question as we go throughout today as a learning question. Okay? The purpose of expressing honesty. And we will come back to that theme as we go throughout today. So I just want to say a couple things about honesty, and then we're going to do an exercise where we're going to demonstrate how to work with it, and then we'll have a chance for you to practice. Okay? The first thing I want to say is that in my experience, in my observation of others and myself, there are predictable consequences to withholding honesty, and there are predictable consequences to expressing honesty. Okay? I'm not up here to say you should be expressing yourself honestly. If I'm playing that game, then I'm living outside the whole model I'm offering, compassionate communication. There's no shoulds. What I am saying, however, is that I have experienced there's a very predictable outcome to withholding for whatever reason. Okay, so one predictable outcome of withholding my honesty is resentment. If someone's doing something that I don't like, that doesn't work for me, and I don't tell them about it, I start feeling resentful toward them, and I start building up a wall, and I start seeing them with negative images. Enemy images, we call them. Okay? Another predictable consequence of withholding honesty is depression. And I mean depression not necessarily in a clinical diagnostic sense, but in a more generic sense. I just feel depressed and downtrodden and discouraged and hopeless about ever getting what I need in this situation. Okay? Another possible outcome of withholding is anger. Now sometimes that shows up in a couple of ways. If I withhold for days, months, weeks, and years, then eventually the volcano needs to erupt. Okay, and I'm going to take it out on somebody, whether it's that person or my coworker, or my wife, or my father. Because eventually, human beings can only hold in so much until it needs to explode and erupt. Now, this is not a very, so we say, elegant way of expressing ourselves. to withhold, withhold, withhold until it builds up and it just explodes. Because in the explosion, we're highly unlikely to stimulate the kind of compassion that we really need in that moment. Now, the other possibility is if we feel anger and the anger builds up, is eventually we may turn it on ourselves. And we may start blaming and guilting and shaming ourselves. And actually, I find this to be even more common than exploding outwardly to other people. Okay, I mean, it's easy to see the outward explosions. We might get into a fist fight on the playground, or we might scream in somebody's face, or we might throw something against the wall, or we might go into a rampage where we call the person every name in the book. That's easy to see. It is more subtle, but I believe even more poisonous, to turn that anger back on ourselves. Because to me, that is a very painful and toxic way of relating to life. And you see, when we do that, it is so painful that we turn to other behaviors to address the pain that we are causing ourselves. Some people turn to alcohol. Some people turn to television. Some people turn to any type of addiction. Is a possible expression of this self-deprecating, self-damning way of going about life. Okay? So there's some behavior that we come up with to counteract this poison that we're putting in ourselves. And it's usually only partly conscious, and it's usually not very successful. So when we withhold, there are a lot of things that we can predict will occur. I would predict that all of us could probably relate to one of those examples at least. Now, however, there are good reasons why some of us choose not to be honest. And I would propose that for many of you, it's because we live in a world in which our honesty is often not particularly welcome. Okay? We've all probably tried to be honest and say, hey, what you're doing right now doesn't work for me. I'd really like you to do something different. Well, I don't know about you, but a lot of the time I've gotten something back with about 10 times the energy. And I found out very quickly what was wrong with me. Because that person was very quick to point out all the things that are wrong with me and how I shouldn't feel that way, I'm overreacting, da-da-da-da. So as a child and as a young adult growing up, I got the impression that it wasn't safe to express honesty, and at the very least it wasn't productive. Okay, so I concluded that based on my experience in life. Okay. So we'd like to offer you a way out of that. However, I'd also like to point out the predictable consequences of expressing honesty. So let's say you do go out after this workshop. Okay, I'm going to try this. I feel pretty good. I got a lot of empathy in this workshop. I'm going to let this person know. Okay? One predictable consequence, likely consequence, is that you will feel very nervous and scared doing it. Because once again, it's not an easy thing to do. Living in a culture, a society, a world in which it's often not welcome. Dr. Rosenberg, the founder of this work, calls it scary honesty. It's honesty that really matters to us, and we've been reluctant to share it for some reason. It's scary. So we will, in our body, probably feel anxiety. Another predictable consequence is that after we have expressed the honesty, we will feel a rush of energy come about us, because we have met our own need for congruence, for self-expression, for authenticity. When we meet our own needs through our own actions, we build energy. We find energy from the universe. It comes in us, and we feel more energized, empowered. We have a sense of hope and possibility, regardless of how the other person reacts. Okay? So that would lead me to another predictable consequence of expressing honesty, which is many people will be reactive toward our honesty, no matter how compassionate we're able to share it in the moment. So then again, it's very helpful to be prepared with empathy. Okay? So as we go forward in this workshop today, we're going to have chances to practice honest expression. First of all, self-honesty. I think David mentioned that, and I think you mentioned something about being honest with yourself, right? So that's where honesty begins. Those of you who were here last night saw our presentation of the key model, the 4 ingredients and then the 3 positions of how we practice compassionate communication. We've got honest expression, which is me to you. We've got empathy, which is you to me. But we've also got self-connection. Okay, now notice, in spite of the commonality of the term in our network of self-empathy, we don't call it self-empathy. We call it self-connection. Because self-connection implies that we have empathy for ourselves and honesty for ourselves. We are willing and able to be honest with ourselves first about how we are in relationship to whatever is happening. So before we are prepared to share it with another, we need to level with ourselves and just acknowledge how this is for me. Okay? So that's going to be the first exercise that we do. So let me just share one more piece briefly. The value of honesty and empathy. I find that empathy is where healing begins. Okay? Empathy supports me with healing in a general sense. Okay? When I receive empathy, I experience a sense of wholeness, relaxation, I get more connected to myself. There's what we call healing. But growth begins with honesty. I cannot or will not grow with empathy alone. And that is a pitfall in our network of compassionate communication. Empathy, 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 empathy. See you later. Not enough. Not enough for our growth and development as human beings. We need honesty. Other people in your lives need your honesty to grow. We need feedback. We need other people's authenticity about how my actions impact you. I need that to grow. It is a gift wrapped up in a package with a bow. If I can offer it with a compassionate intention, and if I can stay present to the other, it will be a delicious gift. Because we all have a need to grow. Honesty leads to growth. Okay? So I think I'd like to pause for a moment